Welcome to Revenue Unscripted, the show for B2B founders, CEOs, advisors, and leaders, where we unpack what really drives stronger revenue and margins. Not just product, not just operations, but much to the chagrin of many leaders, also people and behaviors. I'm your host, Jennica Dixon, president at Slattery Sales Group, and together we'll dive into how real organizations build high-performing sales cultures, avoid costly mistakes, and turn complex deals into predictable growth. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, Michael Galloway, Region VP at EnableComp, a company focused on recovering hard-to-win revenue from complex healthcare claims. He happens to be a seasoned individual contributor who is shooting past quota right now. So I am grateful he took some time out of his busy day to sit down and talk about how to generate more revenue when you do have humans on your sales team, how to think like an owner, and how to build lasting value in the marketplace. And I have to also point out that Michael is one of a handful of elite clients that we serve at Slattery Sales Group. That is, he is our client, not necessarily his company. So he's the one who has spent years investing in his own performance lift, and it shows. Michael, we're incredibly proud to call you a client, and it's a privilege to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Jennica, and thank you for all the help over the years at several companies now, and
Yes.
helping me increase my skills, helping me win more at bats and convert those at bats into closed business. So, very excited to be here.
Thank you very much. This is so much fun because we've had so many conversations over the years around revenue growth, sales organizations. What on earth can a company do to perform better when they do have the human element of sales professionals inside their team? And it's kind of a wild card, and those are a lot of fun conversations. But I got to go back in time. I have to ask. Um, Back when we started working together, I noticed that you had a rather strategic perspective on company growth. And I have to ask, how old were you when you started reading the Wall Street Journal?
Oh gosh, middle school. My father has been a 50-year subscriber, and he would start flagging little interesting articles and bring them home, and I'd have a little spot on the counter in the kitchen where he would have things folded that he thought would be interesting or important for me to read. Not going to lie, it felt a little bit like homework at 13 years old. But as I started to do more of it, it became more and more interesting, and understanding business and the ebbs and flows and the cycles in business, and following what makes companies successful, what makes companies that are successful more successful, and then also some of the strategic missteps that can take place where you squander a little bit of your lead in the marketplace.
I love that. And yes, you definitely you think like somebody who has been reading Wall Street Journal since middle school. So that's really fun for us as we help companies lift their performance. That kind of thinking is tremendously helpful on the sales team. And so I would love to hear from you on some of the things that you've learned over the years in being in the front lines of generating revenue. There are probably a million different questions I could ask, but let me narrow it down to what is one thing that you've learned over the last, let's say, 5 or 10 years that would surprise the younger version of you that was, let's say, getting started in the marketplace? What's something that has surprised you about generating revenue and protecting your margins?
Yeah, I would say when I first started into the sales profession, I was maybe a little misguided into thinking that people wrote checks for upside, that there were all these opportunities to go capture. And all you needed was for me to tell you what my company did and maybe draw a line to the upside that was available. And that isn't the case at all. People write checks to solve pain. And if all you're selling is upside, you need to be really honed in on what is the pain that the upside that you can bring will alleviate. And it may be for this audience, it may be increased margins, it may be increasing revenue. Um, it may not be. Sometimes the pain is quite qualitative in the sense that I remember specifically, I sold a deal at the beginning of this year, And it was simply that the person doing the work was in their supervisor's office complaining a lot. They they weren't really upset with the results, but the supervisor just didn't want to hear about it anymore. And it was taking too much time off of their calendar and keeping them from spending their time doing what they consider to be a little bit higher value conversations and strategic conversations in the business.
Wow. That's I love that. There is a lot there, and it's funny that you mentioned that because a lot of times when we begin working with, a company, as a new client, and we start digging into their competitive strategy, because that's always where we start, um, it's a really simple question, "What do you sell?" But it's a really hard thing to answer in terms of actually going into the marketplace and selling. When you have humans in the marketplace executing part of your go-to-market strategy, the last thing you want them doing is marketing, talking about the upside. Because that's marketing's job. It is marketing's job to promise paradise. That's not sales's job, because sales has to help them through the change in behavior that we're asking them to go through. And it's funny you say that because that's often where we start. And when we sit down with the executive team and we ask very simply, what is it that you sell? And they list all of these amazing things, and we ask them to step back and say, "Awesome. Okay. Um, let's say that you went to work at your next competitor. How many of these things would you have to change?" And it's a moment of truth where they realize that they're hitting the marketplace talking about, high quality, great service, wonderful people, all of these things that are really just table stakes to get on the RFP list. And they're sending their sales team out into the marketplace to talk about all these great things. And it's like, no, 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 that lives on your website. That's great. Let marketing tell the world about everything you do. But what should your sales team be doing in a way that doesn't crush your margins inadvertently? And so I would love to hear from you. What have you seen to be great ways to equip a human sales team to go out into the marketplace? And what are some things that may inadvertently hurt company value?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and there's a lot of nuance there. I don't know if we have enough time in this conversation to really get through all of it. But at a high level, I would say that what inadvertently hurts company value is to talk a whole lot about the stuff that you have. Um, I've yet to work at a company, I know they exist, where you are the only entrant in the market, where you truly have something that's a forklift upgrade from what's available. Uh, those companies are rare. Every company I've been at, we've had competition. Sometimes it's other companies like us. I sell into the healthcare space. Oftentimes, our competition is inertia, competing priorities in a multi-billion dollar enterprise with limited technical resources, limited budget resources, and helping my partners understand that in a list of we can do anything we want, but we can't do everything we want, how we should be positioned for our partnership and our project to be at the top of the list and not at the we'll think about it and do it next year list.
Brilliant. And Michael, I've I remember one engagement where a CRO looked at me and my dad and told us basically, I don't want you talking to our sales team at all about competitive strategy because we don't have any competitors. We are the first to the market. We have the best technology. There is nobody else. All of our competitors are 3 years behind. Do not waste my team's time on competitive strategy because we already have the winning thing. They just need to go out in the marketplace and do it. And my dad's first question was some version of, "Are you telling me that they're ripping it out of your hands?" And the CRO is like, well, no, but and it was like this assumption that just because what we have is amazing and we get it, the marketplace will get it too. And unfortunately, I'm afraid that company that attitude did not serve their company valuation very well, and it didn't end well in that case. So I love what you're
Right.
saying. Keep going. I
Yeah,
just had to.
inertia. The status quo is always an option, no matter what the upside could or would be. Um, And you really have to go deep on the pain of the status quo. I think anyone listening to this podcast wakes up every morning and something happens, and it's been happening so often that it's normal and you don't necessarily think about the pain. All you've done is internalized it and become used to it and a little
Yes.
blind to what the world could be.
One of our
It,
clients actually in very large capital projects calls it institutionalized pain. It's just
Mhm.
woven into the institutional culture. It's accepted. Nobody even is aware that things could be different. It's not that it isn't painful. It's just that it's so institutionalized, nobody really recognizes it anymore. Love
That's
that.
right. That's right. And it's not the pain isn't the same kind of pain if it's new pain. If it's new pain, it's very uncomfortable. If you've been living with it for months, years, quarters, whatever longer term segment of time you'd like to evaluate, it's just part of the daily burden. And it doesn't quite hurt as acutely as if you step somewhere and roll your ankle today. Um, if you step every day and roll your ankle always hurts and you just end up living with it.
So true. I love that. And what Mm. I'm going to pause before I take my next question here. I want to pause and I need to double click on the fact that you keep talking about pain. And anybody who has been exposed to, sales for like 8 minutes is aware that there are a lot of pain-based selling systems out there. And it's interesting. And so I grew up in the sales training industry. I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of different systems and processes. But for those who maybe haven't done a lot of selling, I'll kind of frame this the way that we see it at Slattery, and then I would love your take on this. We often say at Slattery that p- rational people do not get up in the morning and say, "This is a great day to go through the pain of change." And I think that's a really critical mindset for founders and executive teams and advisors to keep in mind that no matter how great your stuff is, rational people don't get up in the morning and say, "This is a great day to go through the pain of change." Humans hate it. And we often kind of make that line between marketing and sales as sales is really those human to human conversations to help people through the pain of change. Um, it's not, I mean, you went straight out of the gate with the truth that it's not about telling them about your stuff. It's not about um explaining your features and benefits and how it works and it's painting the picture of paradise. The reason there are so many pain-based selling systems out there is because people hate going through the pain of change, and that's ultimately what you're up against. And so I'm wondering from your perspective, what could a really healthy organization do to ensure like replicable sustainable revenue? What could they do to equip their sales team to go out into the marketplace with that mindset and not inadvertently bog them down with, the 392 marketing deck, the 392 slide marketing deck about how
Sure.
great we are and, stuff like that. So I would love your perspective because you've been on the front lines and you've had a million conversations and have seen a lot of success, but you've also seen what doesn't work. What does great equipping of a sales team look like?
Well, they have to be trained to have the conversations that quite often are not about you or your stuff. You have to be able to go, and you opened up with the Wall Street Journal question. You need to have a really deep understanding of the market, and you need to have an understanding of the types of challenges that your product or solution can solve for. And go into every conversation knowing that more than likely the person you're talking to hasn't tied what their goals and pain are to your solution. And the way that you do it, you can't tell them, um, because they shut down.
You mean
So
explaining doesn't work for you?
no, it doesn't. And another shiny piece of collateral that gives an unattributed quote, does not work either. Um,
So true.
so you have to have a business conversation, and you have to ask a ton of questions. You have to ask things like, what does success look like this time next year? What are your organizational goals? What are some things that you're currently doing that are on your roadmap to change? And then you have to keep going because they'll tell you, and you can scribble the note down And it's easy to say, oh, yeah, great, thanks. The challenge is slowing down to speed up and really diving into those individually and then helping them ask them, say, look, I can't fix all this for you. Um, but if I could fix some of them, which ones would be the most interesting to have a conversation about and get them to priority rank them. And that's when you start getting a little bit of directional insight into what the problems they have that they feel are worth fixing and what the problems they have that they feel are worth living with. And if you're the solution that you have is at the bottom of the list on the pain ladder, then you're going to have to work really hard to tie that solution and the benefits and the value for what you bring to the table to a different pain other than the one that they're advertising is what they're looking to solve.
I love that. It's so true because sometimes we expect them to have certain priorities. We expect them to have certain pains, and that's not what's at the top of their list
That's
at all.
right. And you need to tease them out too, right? So, because they may give you a list and it's important after you go through and understand them to ask them and say, I noticed you didn't mention this. And I have a lot of these conversations throughout the course of the year, and I hear this a lot. Can you tell me how you're solving for this? And often you'll hear, oh, yeah, that's a problem too.
Mm. Yes, that kind of awareness and deep listening and preparation. That's next level, and it's not easy to necessarily execute.
No, uh, I'm a poor golfer, but I'm much better on the driving range than I am in the tee box. Um, you have to have a lot of repetition, practice with yourself, practice with a mirror, practice with a coworker, practice with a family member,
Yeah.
uh, for it to come out naturally. Where
Yes.
you're asking these kinds of questions, which can get a little uncomfortable, particularly when you're talking to a founder or CEO who is very, very proud of what they have. Um,
Yes. Oh my goodness. That's something that a lot of newer people who are newer to selling, whether they are, coming from another organization or another role, or they're relatively new, um, they don't always understand that our starting point when we hit the marketplace with a solution is the assumption that the other person has a problem. And that's not an assumption they've already agreed to.
no,
Yeah.
they have not. No, they have not.
That's a tricky position to start from, and you've got to be very careful.
And if you start from, I can increase your revenue and your margin, that is not a differentiator from literally anyone in the market. I've never competed against someone who says, I'm going to make this more expensive and it's going to work slightly less well than your current state. Um, so,
Yes.
so if you're bringing what you think your value is to the table and you're doing it really early, then the other side shuts down. You
Yes.
really have to engage them in a conversation about where they have pain, where they're willing to spend their scarce resources, time, attention. Uh, I sell tech enabled services currently. There's an implementation. No one enjoys implementation of a new software. Nobody enjoys onboarding a new vendor. There's a lot of work that goes into that touches a lot of people. And most of the people touching it don't receive the direct benefits. And navigating that and getting everyone on board for a true team, sort of, this is a big win for the organization. And then working with people like a founder or a CEO on the client side to help them understand what the actual upside could be to solving the problem. And it's not always going to be margin and revenue. It could easily be so and so is not going to be in your office 3 hours a week complaining about this. And while you think that's free, what's your time worth? What could you be spending that time on? And what's so and so's time worth? Could we redeploy them to higher value activity? And all of that has to get fleshed out before you ever start talking about a proposal or a pricing or deep into your stuff.
Right. Oh my goodness. That hits on something that my dad and I talk about a lot when we're working with clients, and that is you got to use their currency, not yours. They have ways of measuring things. It might be the way that they themselves are measured on performance. It might be the way that their team is measured on performance, but they have currency. And until you know that currency, you're not there yet.
Right. I
And you
like
need to
to ask the
translate that
annual
value. What?
Yeah,
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
like to ask the annual review question. Yeah, when you're gonna sit down with your supervisor or your board, when you're gonna sit down with the people who assess how the year went for you and for the company, what would you like to be able to bring to them next year that you weren't able to talk about this year?
That's
And
powerful.
again, being able to tie that back into your service or your solution and get them to come to their own conclusion that you're not here selling product. You're here to solve problems and you're here to elevate them personally and the organization, and making sure that that sits on somebody's dashboard and someone in the organization cares about it.
I have seen this in action, and I can tell you, it carries a lot more momentum than doing another demo.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really does. What advice would you give to, let's say, a company leader or a founder who is hoping to grow their company to a point where there's perhaps an exit event or, let's say, another exit event in 2 to 3 years? There are some things that can be done to build sustainable revenue in a way that really supports company valuation. And there are ways to build revenue that don't support strong company valuation with that exit event in mind. I would love to hear your thoughts, especially from the revenue generator's perspective, on what can a company founder or leader do to ensure strong, good valuation.
Yeah. Well, I think the number one thing that I've seen is that some corporate leadership views sales as an expense and believes that their stuff can sell itself.
I have
And
heard that from CEOs myself.
and you can have scalable processes, but you can't have uh, truly scalable people. So you have to develop a culture with the training to make sure the people that you're putting into the marketplace representing your company are properly skilled in making sure that we understand all of our prospects' needs and positioning the company in a way that fixes their problems and leaves ecstatic customers. And that is very different. And it's a very different skill than just hire someone who comes in and tells people what you do and how you do it and what they can get out of it. So in terms of scalable revenue generation, the last mile is the rep. You can have AI, you can have a CRM, you can have stage gate processes, but the rep is the one and it's the tip of the spear that's have to execute all of that. And you also can't be so rigid in what you think the processes are and what you think the value is to not take the feedback when we're in the market and we're coming back and saying, this is how we positioned. This is what we thought we were selling, and this is how we thought we were selling it, but we're getting results here. So if you've got a process that's been in place for years, or you have canned discovery questions, or you have standard market and business training, the world moves very, very quickly. And the really healthy revenue generation teams are constantly taking the market feedback and transitioning it back into the company so that the company's been able to update at the speed the market's moving.
That's a very interesting insight. So I'm going to ask a counter question on that one specifically, which is how does one maintain that kind of agility and responsiveness without devolving into chaos?
That's a really good question. And it's quantitative and qualitative. A lot of marketers use A/B testing.
Sure.
Um, I personally use A/B testing when we are bringing a new solution to market. I'll talk about it one way, in a conversation, and then I'll try to talk about it a different way in my next conversation. And I'm making little notes on what resonates and what lands and what doesn't.
Nice.
Um, I have sold SaaS software in my career, and 3 years ago, a feature or function that was truly mind blowing and really interesting is not as mind blowing or interesting 3 years later. And if
Funny
the
how that
demo,
happens.
right? If the demo looks the same and you're just basing it on what you know and
Yeah.
not from the feedback you're getting from your prospect or your customer, then it gets stale really quickly. And you have to have the culture in place to go back. And when you're having your weekly huddles or your team meetings, or as any sales leader or CEO knows, the reps are all talking with each other about what they're hearing. But oftentimes that gets dropped in the feedback loop back into the formalized processes and conversations of the business.
Wow, that's so true. Yes, and that is a really valuable feedback loop.
Yes.
Okay.
And it kind of depends on the size of the organization. Sometimes you need to feed that back to the founder as the companies get bigger and more scaled. Then you're going to have a chief product officer or a head of development or maybe client experience. And you've got to have a way to get that feedback back to the people who can make the adjustments. So it's not just one rep that's doing something a little bit differently and achieving outsized results. You've built the culture to have the team continue to iterate and improve with the changes in the market and also the changes in your solution set.
I love that. And as you have been in a number of companies and you've been generating revenue in a number of different scenarios, you're just from the stories that you've seen from other companies in the marketplace as well, people you've known, companies known, founders you've known. When have you seen it go off the rails in terms of they're trying to grow, they're trying to scale, they're trying to generate sustainable revenue to support that growth? Um, where does it go off the rails? Where are weakness points that might be blind spots as, during the growth journey? Where might there be blind spots in terms of having humans out in the marketplace generating revenue for you when you have humans as part of your go-to-market strategy? What are some common mistakes or missteps that cost companies valuation?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Um, I can think of several. Uh,
I figured you could.
yeah, obviously, at its core, uh, the reps have to be selling what the company's willing and able to execute. Now,
That
that
sounds
doesn't,
really basic.
it does, but it's particularly in technology. We sell the roadmap and we sell a timeline for the roadmap. I have worked in and I have seen companies, competitors, overpromise the development side, and the rep effectively sells the roadmap. And then, quite honestly, we're a year later and the roadmap that was sold is not in the hands of the market, or it doesn't work the way that we intended it for it to work. And you end up with a dissatisfied customer who terms the contract or is not willing to have a conversation about expanding the footprint of your solution set.
Right.
Um, it's Sales is going to be the tip of the spear in the market. You will not see problems with the solution set until it's too late. That'll be in the numbers. So you have to have, you can't sell a roadmap and then have 18 months from now a bunch of terminations and have a successful exit.
This is
You
so
have
true.
to, you have to be willing to commit to a realistic and conservative development roadmap on the execution.
I'm
And
sorry,
you have
say that again. Your sound cut out there for
Oh, I'm
just a
sorry.
second.
You have to have confidence in the roadmap and have a realistic timetable for the execution. Um, Personally, when I sell a roadmap, I've been known to sandbag some of the dates,
Yeah,
just because things happen. And and if I go to the company and they say, "Oh, this will be ready in February," I've been known to tell my prospect it'll be ready in April. And
smart.
and then you have to find out what does that mean?
Right.
right? And you have to have the customer be able to tell you, okay, I'm okay with April.
Right.
But if you sell February and February rolls around and it's not quite there yet,
Heaven help you if you can deliver. Phew.
that's right. You can't do it.
Yeah.
So I think that all salespeople by nature are optimistic.
Yes.
No one would take this job with the amount of everything that goes into it if there isn't optimism that tomorrow is going to be better than yesterday.
My goodness. Do you remember when you took that questionnaire that we always have salespeople who take a questionnaire, and they're leaders too, because we want an objective assessment of where their selling skills really are in when they're doing their work. One of the 21 core sales competencies that we track is actually outlook, because we need to know that the salesperson believes or the sales leader believes when they get up in the morning and they hit the marketplace that it is a winnable game, because that optimism is so critical to success. Sales is the weirdest position in your entire company. I can tell you that right now. It is
Right.
the only position in the company where if you're doing your job correctly, you are getting the door slammed in your face 9 times out of 10. People are out to take you down, sabotage your work, make sure you don't get the results you're out to get. Nobody else in the company has that kind of resistance. And so for anybody out there who's ever thinking of hiring salespeople, do not treat it like you're hiring an engineer, an accountant, an ops person, or anything. It is an entirely different species. And the mindset is different, the skills are different, everything. Thank you. Thank you for coming to my
I
TED Talk.
think
Carry on, Michael. So
no, I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it because at the end of the day, salespeople get evaluated by one real metric, and that is how much did you or did you not sell? Um, and I do think that there are steps along the way that can set you up for repeatable sales success, both as an individual and scaled across a sales team. But you don't get paid by lines of code. You don't get paid by how did the books close on time. You the customer signing the check is how the business gets the revenue. And occasionally, I think that organizations lose sight of the goal and they make the steps the goal. And you spend a lot of time checking boxes, and you need boxes. You need a roadmap, but
yeah.
you can also overdo it, right? Over document in the CRM, have too many internal meetings that aren't creating value for your customers or helping your organization avoid landmines. And you get to the end of the year and you're at 25% of quota, and nobody gets asked, can we pay you a little more to stay next year? Because you've really nailed all these other boxes we asked you to do.
Oh, that's a good point. That is, at the end of the day, that is the only metric that matters when you're a salesperson. And yet, many organizations burden their sales teams with more meetings about the pipeline, more. I remember um, hearing about one organization where they didn't have clarity into the forecast. They weren't entirely sure what would close when. And so they set a weekly meeting to talk about the pipeline. And they had the reps who had something in the pipeline prepare materials for that meeting by PowerPoint. It had to be by PowerPoint. And then that wasn't, after a month or two of that, that didn't quite bring the clarity that they had hoped. And so they decided to have another meeting. And this time they really wanted to dig into the CRM. So now the reps had to go into the CRM and spend an hour preparing the CRM data. So that it was up to snuff every time. And these became weekly meetings. And then somebody else wanted to enable transparency, further transparency, et cetera. So there's a third meeting added to the calendar, but this time they wanted to see it. And I don't remember what the third format was, if it was Word or Excel or what. Now we've got 3 different formats, and the reps have to take time to prep for 3 different meetings, which is taking them out of the marketplace, which is really high opportunity cost at the time, because we're tracking so many things and we don't have coherence around what it is we're tracking and why. And of course, I mean, you've been doing this a long time. There's just a handful of things and that's it. Um,
That's right.
it can be better. So if anybody out there is in that situation, there's a lifeline. There's a way out. But truly, we've seen that in multiple organizations when we started working together. Like, just there's still not transparency, but there's a lot of busy work
That's
around
right.
that. And I think you're spot on that
A
it's a
lot of data and not a lot of information.
Yes, and it ends up pulling the asset, which is your human sellers, out of the marketplace, as they handle all that data, and it's a lot. Um, I want to make
If I've
sure I
got 3
go ahead.
hours of extraneous meetings a week, I would much rather be spending those 3 hours either having meetings with prospects or prepping for meetings with prospects.
It's all that matters.
And and again, I wanna be careful. Some of these meetings are really important.
Yes, I agree. There's accountability, there are metrics, there are key
Yes,
milestones, but it can very quickly overgrow.
we can. And, I guess we started it down this train of thought with how do you scale across the sales team? Uh, Minimum necessary to give the salespeople the ability to go into the market and be successful.
Yes.
And that's how you get the scale because you're going to get more at bats and they're going to be more substantial at bats. They're going to yield greater results than just a bunch of at bats. Um, and you've got to equip your sales team. You need to know the product. You need to know the value. You need to be able to demonstrate at a high level how it works. You don't need to be a consultant. And consultants, in my experience, get really bogged down in the stuff and don't
Yes.
spend a lot of time with the results of the solution that
Right.
ties back to the pain that the results fix.
I love that because we often say at Slattery, there is a difference between unpaid consulting and consultative selling. We do not want you hitting the marketplace and doing unpaid consulting. It crushes your margins. We've got an entire book on how to avoid unpaid consulting called Wimp Junction. So we wrote a book on how to avoid unpaid consulting. And at the same time, becoming a consultative seller where you really become good at asking those questions like you said, business appropriate but potentially challenging questions. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody can ask those questions. The assessment I was talking about a minute ago helps screen for that because you can teach somebody how to ask great questions and they're like, okay, I've got it, and they go into the marketplace and try to execute on it, and all of a sudden they've got that talk track from when they were a child and their mom was like, don't you ever ask about money. Right? Like they've got these internal talk tracks that say they can't ask those questions. But you made a really good point. That is selling. It's asking business appropriate but potentially challenging questions that challenge the status quo without calling the prospective client incompetent. Because again, that's
That's
our
right.
starting point, is that they've got a problem that we could solve and we know more about it than they do. That's
That's
a
right. And you
risky,
have to guide
risky
them.
place. What
You
was
have
that?
to you have to guide them.
Yeah.
And you guide them through asking them questions and having them answer it and get them to say it. Because when you say it, you're the salesperson who isn't 100% trustworthy.
Ooh, no, thank you. Thank you. No matter how much they like you, right?
That's right. That's right. It's a defense. It's a defense mechanism. Everybody who's listening to this podcast gets phone calls and it's a sales call and you throw your defenses up immediately. I'm not interested is your first response.
Yep.
And and uh and it's sometimes challenging, particularly in enterprise sales and complex sales. You want to pull them through the process
Yeah.
and you can't. You have to go side by side with them through the process. And occasionally you need to ask a question that's truly a gentle nudge. And occasionally you need to ask a question that is maybe a little more than gentle for a nudge.
Yeah.
Um, I'll tell you another thing you asked me earlier that just popped up in this conversation is what do I wish I knew when I
Yeah.
first started? The fact that people take my meetings doesn't mean they're going to buy anything.
I love
And
that.
and and I believe part of my job is to find the no quickly.
Yes.
Pour as once we've established there's some interest, once we've established there's some pain, how do we get the prospect to just say no? It's actually not worth it.
Right.
And that's counterintuitive to when I started. I was like, well, I'm never going to ask that because then we won't get the next meeting and I can't go log that in the CRM. And then when I get my weekly stats, it's not going to look as good as if I've got a follow-up scheduled. Um, I have completely thrown that out the window.
Wow.
From the very first conversation, I'm trying to challenge them, sometimes gently, sometimes less than gently, to give me a reason you shouldn't solve this problem.
Yes.
Going for the no. Um,
Yes.
and the answer to that is I don't have time to have 15 meetings with someone when I can find out in 1 or 2 meetings that it's not a deal that's gonna close.
Right.
I've only got so many selling hours in a day,
Yes.
and if I can use those selling hours selling to prospects, then I'm going to have better results for me personally, but certainly for my company.
My goodness. I love that. The opportunity cost of your time is so high, and tying it back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, how can leaders and founders really ensure that their entire organization is set up for revenue success? I was thinking of an exercise that we often do with our clients, which is to reverse engineer their goals into what does the sales team need to be doing? What are the non-negotiable weekly behaviors that they absolutely positively must be doing in order to reach goal? Because I mean, everybody knows sales activity is necessary, but we break it down into incredibly granular, bite-sized, digestible chunks so that we know exactly what we need to be tracking and what we need to be holding them accountable to. And one of the outcomes of that exercise is this fabulous little number where we get to clarity around the real opportunity cost of each seller's time. And we know, what does it cost to pull a rep out of the marketplace? What does it cost to pull that rep out of the marketplace? Because some companies have really meeting happy cultures where we need to meet about this. We need to collaborate. You know, if they use the word collaborate a lot, that there might be a lot of meetings, not necessarily, but it might be a red flag. And just the cost to the enterprise of pulling 10 reps out of the marketplace for a 45-minute all hands call is huge. It's staggering.
It is, and when you talk about scalability, that's not a one-on-one. That's all the reps,
All the
right?
reps, yes.
And so it's not just one individual seller's opportunity cost, it's your entire company's opportunity cost. And as companies get larger, the opportunity cost scales. Your quotas get bigger. Your salespeople's time is at an individual level, maybe not getting that much bigger, but at the corporate level, it scales really, really quickly.
Yes, that is so true. So true. I'm watching the clock and I'm aware that I do have to land this plane.
Yes,
And I'm wondering if there is if there's one piece of advice that you could give, is this one we can land with? Let's try it. If there's one piece of advice that you could give to, let's say, an investor who recently purchased a company, they've got great fundamentals, they've got great differentiation in the marketplace, and they are looking ahead to wonderful growth and value over the next few years. What is one piece of advice that you would give to that buyer of that enterprise to maintain
well,
that value?
it's going to come down to, for me, you have to have the right people on the team. And I think that companies do a really good job of making sure they have the right people that's coding software. I think they do a really good job in making sure that they have the right people in finance and accounting that are understanding where the business is. I think that there's somewhat of a gap in making sure you have the right people in the market generating revenue. And I've worked at some companies that think, just a salesperson, we'll throw them in there. If it doesn't work out, we'll get somebody else.
Yes.
And what does that cost?
Ooh.
What is that? And it's not just the cost that's related to the business they didn't sell, which is delaying an exit, which is allowing the competition to catch up and pass you in growth. It's also the cost of your brand in the marketplace, having people, your people having conversations in the market and damaging your brand, where
Hmm.
a prospect hangs up the phone and said, man, I don't want to take another call from them. That was a total waste of my time.
Right.
And it may be
Oh,
2 years before you have somebody else get back through and have a conversation. And if you have
yes.
the right person having it and there's value to be captured, you don't lose 2 years. You have another call, and then you end up with one business. So I think that one piece of advice would be have the right people on the team with a particular focus on those people that are in the market representing your business and growing your rep.
Amazing. Amazing. I completely agree. I wasn't entirely sure what direction you were going to take that because there were a few possibilities that I had narrowed it down to. But man, I'm glad you picked that one because that's one that's very near and dear to our hearts at Slattery because we love supporting companies through growth. We love supporting individual contributors. And when those fits aren't right, everybody's hurting, everybody's struggling. And that's hard. So I completely agree. I think that is an absolute key to and sometimes an undervalued key to great growth.
Yeah, and the add-on to that is when you have them, keep them,
Ah! Oh, and just with that, you have unlocked the next topic for our podcast.
right? I mean,
Yes.
it's, "Oh my gosh, we've got these people and they're out in the market and they're just killing it and we're growing," and then there's always going to be someone, and that someone may be listening to this conversation, they're making too much money.
Yes.
We need to
Oh,
we need to tweak the comp plan. We
yes.
need to th
Effective
that
30 days from now, even though it's a 13-month sales cycle. Yes.
Mhm.
Huh?
Because
Oh,
your competition wants them.
yes, they
You
do.
know what companies are beating you in the market. Your reps know what reps are beating them in the market.
Yes.
And the really savvy companies at the leadership level know both of those.
Yep. I love that. Michael, thank you so much. Truly, that's a whole nother topic that I will be picking your brain about in another one of these because we have to do this again. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a lot of fun. I love the fact that you think strategically. You do think like an owner when you are in the position of generating revenue, and I love that perspective. And yet you've also got the boots on the ground experience, so it's a
Yep.
very good combination. So
Look,
thank you.
I am an owner. I can't reach my personal goals and my family's goals without thinking like an owner. I own my territory. I own my client relationships. It's up to me to hit all of my goals, which are aligned with the corporate goals. And you have to, I may or may not have equity in the business, but I have all the equity in the upside of being delivering revenue.
Sounds like a recipe
And
for success.
yeah,
That's fantastic. Thank you again for joining us. I want to honor your time. I know that you've spent a lot of it with us, and I know I had tech issues at the beginning that slowed us down. So thank you so much for joining us.
well, thanks for having me. I love having these conversations. The actual strategy and how it has the concentric circle with the tactics of sales
Yeah,
is fascinating to me.
it
I
is.
I
Yes.
enjoy that piece of it,
Yay.
and enjoy getting a chance to talk with you about it.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad you did. And we will do this again because it's a lot of fun and you've got a lot of great insights to share. So thank you so much. And to all of our listeners, you're on LinkedIn. So if they want to connect with you there, they can find you there, of course. Michael
Yep.
Galloway.
Yes. Yep.
And
I'm there.
thank you.
And
We'll be back.
have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye.